Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this live Jazzcast webinar. Thank you for joining us. I know there are lots of different people signing in today from all over the place. So let me just explain who I am, first of all, because I know a lot of you won't have had a lesson or anything with me before. My name is Sean. I'm a jazz educator here in London. I've been playing and teaching for sort of 20 plus years. And I was probably the first one to teach jazz piano on Skype. So that's been going on for about 9.5 or so years. And the most recent adventure has been Jazz Skills, which is my membership website where we have members all over the world who watch my recorded lessons. Okay, so there are some free lessons and there are currently about 200 lessons for members. So those are the things that we do. And let's, with that, move straight in to what we're going to do today. So hopefully some of you are getting signed in now, I see. There will be a chance to ask questions and stuff. And I'm just going to keep the question and answer app open in case people need it. Okay, yeah, it looks like things are starting to kick off. People are arriving. All is good. So let me just first let you know that on these sorts of broadcasts, and probably any broadcasts, there will be a delay from the time I speak to the time that you hear it, okay? And that delay can depend on your connection. It can depend on a number of things, you know. So if you do ask a question, then try and make it really clear. If it's, you know, if you say the chord you just played, it could be a while after I've played it or said something, okay? And if you do want to ask a question, let me just show you how you can do that. I believe you need to be signed in on Google Plus to do it. This is just a screenshot that one of my students took, so that's why I just sort of redded him out there. You should be able to see this little sort of grid here. You cannot, by the way, see that if you're on an iPad or if you're on a mobile tablet, any sort of device like that. But otherwise, you should be able to see that, and then you can see the apps that are enabled for the session, and that's the Q&A app, okay? And from there, you should be able to ask a question. So let me just stop screen sharing and get back to me, and here I am. Okay, so let's quickly talk about what we are going to do today and sort of lay down some foundations for improving your jazz chords. Now, the challenge for me is this is quite a deep subject. There will on the call tonight be students that have been with me for a number of years, sort of most of my students stay for many years. There will be people who've never met me before, there'll be people who've just started playing jazz, there'll be people who have been playing for a number of years. So bear with me and keep in mind that it's not an easy thing to do to teach in a way that hopefully you'll be able to, you know, touch everybody. I'll do my very best. And I'll do my best to answer as many questions as I can as well. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, first of all, just run through some of the things that you could stop doing, or some of the simple things that you can just change and create better sounding chords. You know, I don't like it when people get on YouTube and say, hey, you can do this real quick. But tonight is based on the kinds of things that happen when virtually every new student comes to see me, okay? Hello, Bev. Thank you for saying good evening. Okay, we know that the question and answer app is working. Thanks for that little test. So, you know, generally when pretty much everyone comes to see me, there are issues that come up that are common to virtually every player. So I'd like to run through some of those, get rid of some of the myths of jazz piano. And also talk about, you know, things that I feel you can change very quickly in order to transition from if you're a classical pianist or you're a pop pianist and you've basically not got a jazz accent, you've got a classical accent or a pop accent. Now, when we talk about sound, you know, creating better sounding jazz chords or improving your jazz chords, I have a feeling that to a lot of people, that means creating more ninths, 11ths, 13s, 156ths. It's not about that for me at all. It's just about sounding authentic. You can sound authentic with 3 notes. you can sound authentic with 10 notes, you know. But I think the trend seems to be towards teaching people to fill out more and more and more notes. Nothing really wrong with that, but it shouldn't be at the expense of getting the foundations down, you know. So let's see some of these things that you could be doing and see if it applies to you, okay? So when most pop players or classical players get into jazz piano, they're losing the subtlety that's available in chords. And the reason I want to teach this anyway, even though I know that there are a lot of my students on the call, is because I think people could do with some reminding sometimes, okay? So, the amount of root notes that you place in a chord will probably kill the subtlety that's available to you. Okay, so jazz is a very subtle music, and the subtlety is achievable in the part we're talking about today, the harmony, the chords. The subtlety is achievable by avoiding playing too many root notes. Okay, so for example, a lot of people will come and say, I know C major 7, there's 2 C's there, and there's a C here as well. So look what we've got. We've got 3 C's and only 3 other notes. Now, how are we going to get a subtle sound like that? It's not going to happen. So I'll be showing you ways to you know, get past that issue, because I know that some of you will have that too. But let's just quickly run through a little list here. Another thing that you can do immediately to improve the sound of the jazz chords you're already playing is to address how hard or soft you play in the lower region. Now, I know that a lot of the books tell you that you should only play, you know, that you should only play up here if you're playing with a bass player. I don't really feel that's true. What I didn't mention right at the beginning is that I'm lucky to have had some great teachers, Leon Cohen in London, Dr. Barry Harris from New York now. Barry played with just about anybody you've ever heard of. And you know, I learned a lot of these concepts from them, and this one I remember learning from Barry. He said, I've played with the best bass players in the world and nobody's ever said to me, look, can you not play down there because it's in my way, you know? But what I do find with newer jazz players is that people tend to be used to playing too heavy down here. And I know there are some classical pieces where that's okay, but I would say by and large, if you really listen to jazz, if you listen to the piano player, especially listen out for trio and solo recordings where it's clearer, you will find that this is normally a lot softer than this. It's probably, I estimate, 70-30 even in favor of the right hand in a lot of recordings. So for example, I'll play the way I mean in the left hand. So I'm playing much more gently in the left hand. I wish I would have chosen a tune I actually know. So the left hand is really quiet. Now, because I'm teaching on a digital today, I'm able to turn off my touch sensitivity completely. This will be horrible. I really don't want to play like this, but you'll see what happens. Awful stuff, you know. Never want to play like that. So being softer down here makes a big, big difference. If you just consider if we opened up a grand piano and had a look, what we would see down the bottom end, big, long, thick, spring-like strings, and at the top almost like little paper clips. So if we play them the same way, clearly we're going to get too much for our touch down the bottom of the piano. And that is one of the main things I think that people can improve when they're looking to improve the sound of their jazz chords. Okay, another one. Pierre, nothing was wrong with your French accent. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but I'm marking your question as answered. But thanks for putting. I know Pierre, don't worry. I know he's normally having a laugh about something, whether I understand it or not. I don't know. Peter Sims. Peter, how you doing? Peter says it sounds like me. So you've had these issues, Peter, clearly. Well, hopefully this will help you, my friend. Okay. Another one. Another thing you can do without even learning lots of different new sexy notes to play on a jazz chord. Another thing you can do is stop using your thumb to fill in time. I would say most people, especially early on in their jazz playing, they'll play like this. Let me think of a song. Let's see. Okay, let's have. Okay. People play like this. So this thumb is like, it's responsible for the time. It shouldn't be like that. So what we need to get to through listening, through feeling time, through practice, but listening is a big one for this. But we should be feeling, you know, that wasn't my best playing, but it's, you know, it's not necessarily outlining. A lot of people play like this, you know, so try not to use your thumb for that. Everybody does maybe a little bit of it, and it's okay if you have, you know, let me play a turnaround. But look what happens if you just start inverting chords. Which brings me on to another point, which is inversions. We'll come back to this issue of the thumb in the left hand. And if I'm going too fast, or if there's anything you want to ask about something that's happened, feel free to put in a question, okay? So, if you start to use inversions, your whole life will change, okay? This is certainly what I found. Let's take a very simple sequence. Let's take 1, 6, 2, 5 in the C, in the key of C. C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7. Now I'm going to show you ways of using voicings over that today. So we're not going to be void of voicings. We're definitely going to talk about getting nicer sounds in your chords, adding some extra notes and stuff like that. But just taking these chords in a relatively simple way. I'm not going to play them in their most basic forms. Certainly not the C major 7. I'm just going to move one note. So rather than play this, I'm going to put this here. Okay. Otherwise, they're going to be as they are, I suppose, for now. We've got 1, 6, 2, 5. Very simple 5. You know, I'll probably do something more interesting than that. But let's see. If I just invert, see, I've taken that, whatever my C major 7 voicing is, and inverted the right hand. And then joined to the next and nearest A minor 7. Okay? Once I'm there, I can invert that. And then get from that A minor 7 to the nearest D minor 7. You know, so rather than just playing all this business that people do, I can just another inversion of D minor 7. Taking some liberties with chords I haven't shown you, but I just had to get something in on a G7. Okay, but if I play the way I really want to play, you'll see that in my playing now. So if I say so you see I'm using a lot of inversions to fill the time and join the chords up. I've got, if you're interested in learning how to do that, I've got a free course on my website, which is jazzskills.co.uk, and you can also use Jazz Skills. And you can go there and you can sign up for that. It's called my Jazz Improvers course. It's free. It's a 3-day course, and the first day looks at exactly that. A lot of people really like the course, so give it a try. Okay, so other quick tips. So we're just running through some quick tips at this stage. Yes, right. We've got to talk about two things. One is, if you want to improve the sound of your jazz chords, try to use the chords for their real purpose. And their real purpose is probably easier to say what their real purpose is not, rather than what their real purpose is. Sometimes with jazz it's easier to say the thing that we're not looking for. It reminds me of, there's a quote, I think it was Michelangelo who did the carving. Was it the carving of the elephant? I'm not certain, but the quote is, how did you carve this beautiful elephant out of one piece of marble like that? And he said, I just whittled away everything that didn't look like an elephant. And similarly, I think we can, if we're listening, we can whittle away everything that's not sounding authentic. Now, with that, I know that a lot of people will go, whoa, you think everybody can hear like you? Well, I'm improving my hearing every day, my listening of jazz every day. I certainly wasn't born transcribing Charlie Parker solos. I've done some of them, but, it's a work in progress. I'm a work in progress, and that's something I'd like to add to my introduction. I'm not fully formed, and most people will tell you they're not. And I'm not better than you. I'm not cleverer than you. I've probably just got more experience than some of the people I'm trying to help. So, in terms of listening, please don't think that you can't hear stuff, so there's no point listening. Listening should be about a third of your study, if not more. And it's something that you can do while you're not at the piano. It's something that you do on those boring commutes or whatever it is, or when you're exercising, or when you're cooking, or when you just want to listen to some music, of course. It shouldn't be a chore. So, for example, listen to, now you've heard about the left hand stuff of try and be gentle down the bottom of the piano. You've heard that today. Try and spot it in some recordings. See if that's familiar to you once you start listening. I was just looking at some of the questions coming in. Okay. So, don't use the chords for a purpose they're not designed for. I've met a lot of students who use their jazz chords in order to keep time in a tune. But they're not designed for that. They've got higher calling than that. Now, this piano, if we look at the end of it, or even this speaker that you can't see, I could sit on it, it will bear my weight, I could use it as a chair, I could lean on it, I could put a drink on it, I never would, but it has a much higher calling and is designed to do something much more useful than that. And your jazz chords are exactly like that, okay? So try not to use the left hand in order to, or the chords, I shouldn't say the left hand because we're going to talk about putting chord notes in both hands. So try and use that in order to enhance your music. Try not to use the chords to keep your time, use your feel to keep your time, listen to keep time. Now, here's a good listening exercise. Listen to some jazz and make sure you can feel what a 4-bar phrase is. Can you hear the bass? Can you hear a 4-bar phrase in it? Can you still keep your time when the bass player is playing a solo? Can you still keep your time in the drum solo? Do you know where you are in the 32-bar form? All those things will help you actually improve all elements of your jazz, including improving your jazz chords, because now you're not using them to keep the time. You're not using them, for something they're not designed for, and you have more freedom. Okay. Pierre, you're absolutely right. The nearness of you in C works beautifully to do inversion practice. I think I used that in the free course. I'm not certain. Okay. One more thing for new people who may not have seen me teach before is I learned, I think probably Dr. Barry Harris was very, very strong on this, and these aren't ideas I've ripped off YouTube or something. I've studied with him for 10 years. But I would say more modern jazz playing can focus around sometimes just chords in the left hand. And we get this idea from the books that, we play melody notes in the right hand. Let's take the nearness of you, Pierre. Let's do it in F. Now, I'm not going to play like this. So there's a problem with this theory. I'm not going to play like that. I want chord notes in my right hand. I don't have to do anything rhythmically interesting once I get some chord notes in the right hand. Lots of inversions. Of course, movement. Something, wherever we're going, I don't know. So, I think we've covered a lot of stuff there now. Any questions before I move on? Now's the time. Any questions about that stuff before we get into some of the technical business? Pierre has one. Pierre says, I'm not sure about the concepts of purpose of chords. Can you give a practical example on a simple tune to highlight the good and bad of this? Well, Pierre, it's not so much a technical playing thing as a thing that people use when they're struggling with rhythm, because virtually every student that comes thinks they have a rhythm problem, you know, but a lot of those problems are overcome by listening and focusing on the time, by slowing down their practice and sometimes my speaking. Sorry to those who don't have English as a first language. I try to remember to speak slowly, but when I look at the time and get excited about jazz, I start racing a bit. So it's not so much as technically what they can do. It's more of a fact of, if, for example, I say to a student, okay, you just play a solo in your right hand, and I'm going to accompany you. A lot of people don't know where they are anymore because they haven't got the chords to play. It shouldn't be like that. You know, it's stuff like that more than, you know, how it will sound if that person's using the chords to play, to keep their time. Although you will hear it because all the chords will be on the first beat, you know. That will be probably more evident in swing, but it's more about the approach. Okay, I hope that helps. So let's see. Okay. One thing that we can really improve about major chords. So this is really a series of tips. Improve about major chords is, many times you'll find your book or lead sheet, or, you know, fake books, where they're faking it, you know, they contain the wrong chords often. They contain chords that don't work. They contain chords that are extended 9, 11, 13 to within an inch of their lives. But if you look at the original chord changes, they're very simple, because a lot of these tunes, most of these tunes were show tunes or film tunes, and then jazz musicians got their hands on them and, you know, extend the harmony and stuff like that. Consequently, you will see stuff. I wonder if I can even show you one. Let's try and do that. Let's show you what I mean. I'm just going to get something up on screen and then I'll share it with you. And while I'm doing that, let me just tell you, Ralph Patt's website is really good. Sadly, Ralph isn't with us anymore, but I'm just going to share a screen here so you can see his website. And this is Ralph Patt's website, called Ralph Patt's webpage, but the thing that's really cool on here is what he calls the vanilla book, where you can see the original chord changes, or close enough to the original chord changes. Not always original, but they were developed by listening to, I think, Lester Young records, where Lester Young used to tell his pianist, when they said, hey, Prez, which chords do you want? He said, just play the vanilla changes. Don't need anything special. I'll do my thing. So if you look at the song index here, let's look at the nearness of you. I think it will be under nearness, yeah. So all you get on this website are just chord changes, and very basic ones. Nothing wrong with that. But look here. You get stuff like this. Just F. Notice there's not a 9th, 11th, 13th, flat 9, sharp 9, flat 13, 10th in sight. So it becomes up to us to say, well, just because somebody said this is an F13 in a book, does it need to be? You know, what's the melody saying? Because the melodies didn't use those extensions as melody notes. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that the note in your melody is a chord note. So they didn't use them that much, you know. Look at that, B flat major to B flat minor. So The majors I want to focus on, though, are things like this. It is our job to know whether they should be major sixes or major sevens. And Pierre gets it. Brilliant. Thank you, Pierre. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So let me just switch the cameras over. A lot of these books forgot about the major sixes. Not all of them, but a lot of them did. Because I think, it's just a theory I have, that some of the people that put the books together said, hey, oh yeah, jazz musicians, if it was a C on the original sheet music, they make majors into major sevens. And if it was C minor, they make minors into minor sevens. But what about the major sixes and minor sixes? So, if you have the root note of the chord in the melody, let's say on a C major, then please don't make it C major 7, even if the book says that's okay. Alright? The chord that you should play there is C6. And don't take my word for it, again, go and listen. Listen to recordings before 1958 or 60. Listen to those great pianists. Listen to people like Hank Jones, Barry Harris, Bud Powell, you know. That's what you'll hear. Listen to Ellington, you'll hear sixes. So if I'm playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, see, I need that 6 on the first chord because it's a C major. Let's say somebody only wrote C major, and you've got to decide, well, we've got to make it 6. 1, 3, 5, and 6, okay? But sometimes if the 6 is in the melody, you also want to do that. You know, you can play a 6 chord there. Which leads me on to the first voicing I want to talk about. Okay, before I do that, I'm just going to look at... Oh, hi Ben. Good to see you. Okay, 2 Bens on the call, I believe. So, the first voicing I want to talk about is how best to voice a major 7th chord. I know a lot of you, my students, my trusty students, will know this, so bear with me. Hopefully you'll still pick up some tips today. And if you have particular questions about your own jazz chords, please feel free to post them maybe a little bit later on. Jay's asking a question. Jay, I'll come to your question in just a minute. So, remember we talked right at the beginning about getting some subtlety in your chords. So let's imagine you've got a C major 7 written. Let's imagine that B's the melody. To get chords in your right hand, you want to play a chord here, but keep the melody note at the top. Now again, we've got these two together. I've got nothing against semitones, but do we need 2 roots? The whole world's going to be a lot softer if you at least get this to here. So what I do a lot of the time, I certainly teach this early on, is get the bottom and top note of your chord. So we've got that major 7th. And just move this up a step. Get a much softer sound than going like that. Okay, I hope you agree. Now, I've learned this and taught this as, if you look at this and invert it, this is a G6. So we get G6 over C. Now, those of you on the call who haven't studied with me before or heard these concepts, you might be thinking, well, that's just a C major with a 9 in it. Why can't I call it that? So I've got to be really honest here. There's only so much we can fit in 1 hour. But we have movement scales. This G6 moves through a scale here. And I'm really sorry, I can't teach everything in one lesson. But take my word for it, that it creates all these beautiful movements. If you think about the G6, okay, that's why I learned it in that particular way. This is something that Barry Harris taught, still teaches. Okay, so G6 over C. So if we're looking for that, we want to look for the 5th of C. We can put this G major 6 on top of C in any inversion. So that's also G6. This is also G6 over C. Now I've got a bit more space, I'll take the bottom and top notes. But notice something. What's really happened here is we've stopped doubling the root. So a really easy way to get into this would be to just move the root up. okay? It gives you that same result, but you should know that it's G6 as well, because it's going to give you all those lovely movements later on in your playing, okay? So now if we apply this to that 1-6-2-5 progression we had, we've got G6 over C. So we should practice inverting these G6s, okay? So now if I do that in that 1-6-2-5 progression, that kind of thing, you've got much more to do and play. You know, so it is really important to have chord notes in the right hand, particularly when you are playing the head. So I think this subject gets a bit confused because people will hear people playing chords just in the left hand, but that's mostly in the solos. And Jay is talking, well, we did a little on this. Jay's wondering, he's wondering if you could explain how to fill out a tune more than just what's on the lead sheet itself, e.g. movement, passing chords, which are still focused around the melody written. Yeah, Jay, exactly. So we'll take, I think you were learning Somewhere Over the Rainbow, if I'm not mistaken. So we've got C6, maybe D minor 7. See, look, I've got, first thing I've done is say C6 to the C in the melody. It jumps up an octave to a D minor 7, but I'm keeping the D minor 7 in the right hand. E minor 7, all the E minor 7 notes here. Now it's F major 7. So F major 7, according to what we're saying, we're looking for the 6th chord that starts on the 5th of it. C6 over F. And that's my melody note. So I want a C6 that's in this position. Again, it's just a matter of this F in the F major 7 coming up a step, okay? I'm not playing in time particularly on purpose, but I think I should. So these movements all come about by knowing those movement scales that I was just briefly mentioned. But Jay, I think the first thing that you could do is look at getting chord notes in the right hand, whichever tune you're playing. Try and make the melody the top note of that chord, and you know, just take 4 bars of a tune and make sure you can do that. Your playing will change so much without having to do anything spectacular, okay? Okay, let's see. And probably the second voicing that you should learn, guys, is using a diminished on dominant, and then how to invert those as well. So I know many of you will know about this already, but I know some of you won't, so bear with us. When you play a dominant chord, it actually comes from a diminished. So we're just going to quickly run over this process, and I hope some of you will still find it useful, even if you're Jazz Skills members or students. Let me just screen share here. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit as well. Okay, so let's see what we got here. You're welcome, Jay. So let's take this diminished chord. So we have an A-flat diminished chord. But every diminished chord has 4 related dominant chords. Okay, by dominant I just mean a 7 chord. 7 like G7, C7, something like that, okay? And the way you find them is just to move any of these diminished notes down a half step. So if I take this A flat and move it down to G, I get G7. Let's put it back. Let's move the B down this time. I get B flat 7 in an inversion. So you've got to be able to see the inversions. Let's move the D down this time. We get D flat 7. Again, it's in an inversion. So like I said, inversions rule the world, okay? And then finally, if we move the last one, let's move this F down. We get E7. So did you notice that the new note becomes the root of a dominant chord? So when we had this A flat diminished and we move the A flat down to G, it becomes G7. The new note was G. We move the B down to B flat, becomes B flat 7. Move the D down to, sorry, D should have gone down a half step to D flat, becomes D flat 7. Move the F down to E, becomes E7. So just by learning that concept and knowing it really well, you can do a ton of cool stuff. So we're going to talk about a ton of that cool stuff. So let's put this into action, okay? And then we're going to join all this stuff up. And you'll see, I hope, that you don't need 150 extensions in your chords to start to sound a bit more authentic. Just get good at this stuff and you'll be doing really well. Okay, so this is the diminished that I started with. This A flat diminished. And remember I said to you, if you move any note down, you'll get a dominant chord. So if I move that A flat down, I'm going to get G7, right? But here's now something that we could do with that. We could take the G7. Remember I said in your left hand, you'll often play just bottom and top. That's the bottom note of a G7. That's the top note of a G7. Now, play the diminished over the top of it and you've got something gorgeous. G7 goes to C. I'm going to do this in every inversion. So I'm inverting the diminished each time. Did anybody notice what kind of major I went back to? If you did, maybe pop a question or a comment into the Q&A app and let's see how many people got it. So what kind of major did I play? How did I handle the C major? I'll do it one more time. So that's, see that diminished? That's the diminished that G7 comes from because it's a half step away. So when you want to get back to it, let's say you've got a G7 and you're looking for the diminished that you could play on it, just raise the G again. There are many ways to do this. This is the way that seems to make sense to a lot of people, and you'll have the diminished that it came from in the first place, okay? Again, remember I said to you, invert these things. So invert them, get good at going. Stuff like that. That's a 5-1 progression, G7 to C. That kind of thing, or invert them down. And they can be random, it doesn't have to be straight down, the inversions. Pick random ones. Or break them. That kind of thing. So look at that, A flat diminished. Outer notes, inner notes. Inverted. Outer notes, inner notes. And then we're on that landing chord. So, if you want to learn more about that, again, you can look at the free lessons I've got on jazzskills.co.uk and select the sort of intermediate stroke advanced lessons, and you'll learn about that. Okay, so now if we take our 1-6-2-5 chord sequence that we had in the key of C, let's imagine we're creating a ballad introduction. So 1-6-2-5 using inversions. Now, I haven't seen any comments come in yet, but that could be because of the delay of the broadcast. So, I don't know if I want to reveal it yet or if I want to wait. So, I think I'm going to have to reveal it. So, G6 over C is how we play C major 7. And that's how I did all of those. So when I played those diminished, see that's the diminished chord on the G7. I'm looking to get from there to G6 over the top of a C. So that's the way I think of C major 7. Okay. If you've got other ways that you prefer, no problem. I know some people will hate these methods, no problem. There'll be people who agree with your way. Go do it, no problem, that's fine. This has done a lot for me. Now, if I invert that now, invert the A flat diminished, and then land on the nearest G6 over C. That kind of thing. But I promised you a 1-6-2-5 progression. So, C major 7, A minor 7, D minor 7, G7 using its diminished. And just a reminder, if you've got G7 you want to find the diminished, raise that G a half step. Okay, so here's an example of putting all that together in a 1-6-2-5 introduction, just using inversions, pretty much nothing else. So most of that inversions. Now I'm also going to play an A7 chord instead of an A minor 7 chord. See how it starts to build up more and more each time. So you can use A7 as the 6th chord. This is the diminished. Raise the A a half step, that's the diminished that it came from. Got to get to the nearest D minor 7, that kind of thing. Okay. So that's the first two inversions. Those are the first two, not inversions, I'm sorry. Those are the first two voicings that you really should know. Okay. Now, what people often do, as soon as you show them that, is they say, I can't do it, I get it, but I can't put it into tunes, or all kinds of stuff like that. The I can't make it practical is a very, very common response, especially a sort of a week or two after I've shown that to a student. The first thing you must do is make it available to yourself. Okay, with all this stuff, make them available to you. So first, whatever it is, play it till you can do it. Then play it till you can maybe use it. Then play it till you can understand it. Or it might be the other way. Maybe play it till you can do it. Then play it till it's making more sense. Then play it till you can use it. The fourth part of that is you'll play it till you can really find the prettiest parts of it and make it your own. Okay? But one way that you can force in things like that into your playing would be to pick up a lead sheet and say, well, where could I do that? So let's do one together. So here are the kinds of things you can do when you're trying to learn these concepts. Okay. Now, this next part is no substitute for being able to find those voicings that we've been talking about, for practicing them. Okay. So, now, Decipher Morgan, you've just said the word how. I'm not sure what you mean, so please address your question to a particular part, because you may have missed the part where I said there is a delay between the time I say something and the time most of you will hear it, so I don't really know which part you're referring to, so please explain it more. I'd love to answer your question. Okay, so look, we've got a B flat major here. What I'm going to do is look at this note, this D, and say, okay, is there a voicing that I can play there? Well, remember how we play our voicings. You want me to apply it to a different tune? Okay, well, I'll maybe show you something about that in a minute. So I'm going to say this is, let me just grab a bit of text. Oh, I didn't see it. What's the fifth of B flat? F. So we say F6 over B flat. Okay, and we want it so that D is the top note. So we've got to practice an F6. So D is the top note. Let me show you how to do that, because I know I'll lose some of you on that unless I do. So I've got F6 over B flat, D at the top. There's my D, there's my F6, B flat at the bottom. That's it. That's my shape. So I should be able to invert that right hand. But that's my shape. Okay, straight back to the screen share. Let's find a place where we can use a dominant and diminished as well. Let's see. Just having a look for some that may be helpful. It might be, it's not that we can't do them here. Okay, let's look at this F7 here. F7 with a G in it. So we've been looking at diminished chords. Let's see if we can do something with F7 with a G in it. No would be the answer. See, so this is good that this happens. So we can look at why not. So F7 with a G in it is a natural 9, and our diminished has a flat 9 in it. Okay, so not in this case. I know a lot of you students have been asking me about these sorts of applications, so I hope it helps. Let's see what else we got. Beginning to regret choosing this tune, because there's reasons why I don't want to do it all over the place that would cause trouble. Let's pick something else. My one and only love. What a tune. So right at the beginning we've got G in the melody. We've got C major 7. There's nothing stopping us playing our G6 over C voicing. Okay? So right there is where we can play one. G6 over C. Let's see what else we got. We got a G7 with a B in it. So right there, G7 with a B in it, we can do something. That's a perfect place for diminished. So remember our diminished chords. We could say G sharp diminished, or we could say, let's say A flat diminished, just because it's easier to type. A flat diminished over G. Now I'm going to demo that on the piano. We've got these two chords, G6 over C. We've got A flat diminished over G. And this is where I think a lot of people get lost, because they're trying to play everything everywhere. No need to do that. Find a couple of places in the tune to do it. So we've got the tune. Here we go. G6 over C. Did you catch it? Here is G7 with a diminished chord. See, look, here's a straight G7. Take that root up a half step, you've got the diminished chord. C6 over F, because F major 7 has C6 on there, on the 5th, okay? A7, look, perfect example. A7 with that A taken up a half step to create a diminished. Okay, so a couple of examples already just in that tune. Decipher Morgan, also known as Ben, I believe, wants me to talk about applying stuff to Green Dolphin Street. Sure, let's do that right quick. So on Green Dolphin Street, that's a perfect example of, first of all, where that first chord should be C6, because C's in the melody, okay? Ben, that's other Ben, both Bens at the same time. That's a great question. I'll look at it. I'll explain that in a second. So, back to On Green Dolphin Street, somebody asked me about. It's got to be C6 because C's in the melody. Okay, now, I wouldn't play diminished here. So there's a rule to this. Don't play a diminished on this D7 unless it's going home. What does going home mean? It means straight down a 5th, okay? So for me, I found that vast majority of the time, over 90% of the time, I won't do that. I've chosen a natural 2 there, not a diminished 1. I think that's a major thing. Yeah. Let's see what else we got. Where are we? And then we have, let's see. This is more a tune that we'll use when we talk about movement, Ben, because this is full of movement. It's diminished there on the G7. Let's get some time in now. On the A7 there, diminished. Here's one on E7, perfect example. The E7 is going down a 5th to A minor 7. Look at this. This is E7 in my right hand. Remember I said I'm trying to keep chord notes in the right hand. Move the E up a half step, becomes diminished. Okay. B7. Same thing. Look, here's a diminished. Okay. That's your diminished because this is your melody note. Hope that helped Ben number 1, who's got a pseudonym today. Now, Ben number 2 is asking, what's the deal with the 3-6-2-5 all in a single bar of My One and Only Love? Should we have a look at that, Ben? Let's take a look. So I think Ben's talking about this region right here. Let me find a pen to write with. He's talking about this. Yeah, you got the third in C, 6 is A7, 2 is D minor 7, 5 is G7. So sometimes you get that bend. It's called a quick turnaround. Now let me play how it would be with and without it. Let's see, I'm not sure if we can do this without it. I think the problem, yeah, I suppose, I mean the only other thing you might do there is to say, you might say C, because E minor 7 in the key of C means the same thing. Chord 3 in this key and chord 1. It's hard to draw a 3-line play, sorry guys. So 3 and 1 means the same thing. So sometimes you go 1 and then maybe a break and you go 2, 5, which is G7 to D minor 7 to C7. It's really hard to draw freehand, sorry. I won't try and do it. But sometimes you make it a quick turnaround. So let me show you on the piano. So Ben. Could be C, then G7. Just 1, 5, you know? C is the first chord in the key of C, so that's 1, G7 is the 5th. So that would be probably the simplest way to take that turnaround, and you'll see a lot of times when people do that, they split it up more. So they say, well, why not like a 1-6-2-5 or a 3-6-2-5, so that you get this. 3, 6, 2, 5, like that. Okay, so I think it's just that, Ben. You know, you find another way to play that turnaround. Okay, so if there are any other questions, now's the time, because we're getting ready to finish up. I can't believe how quickly the time's gone. But what I'll do is I'd like to leave with a little bit more of an advanced tip on those dominant chords using the diminished. So we talked about using diminished chords. Peter, you're back with your diminished question, so let's have a look. You said that you wouldn't use the diminished unless going home. Yeah, Peter, I think I find it best to use that diminished sound, or indeed a lot of the dominant voicings, and we get a lot of dominant voicings, more than any other voicing, because dominants come from the most scales, okay? So they have the most extensions, because we use, chords come from scales, not the other way around. All that stuff, you know, you learn a chord, then you play a scale over it, you learn a scale to play. It's more that they come from a scale. But I found just through listening, really, that all these kind of sexier voicings, they sound best when you're going home, you know? So yeah, I use it when I'm playing like a 5-1 type progression. Okay, so another quick tip for you is using the brother chords. Let's have a quick review of brother chords. Hopefully this will help some of the students with them and give people an idea to go away with as well. We've got a couple of minutes to get through it. I hope you guys won't mind if I just run over sort of a couple of minutes, okay? So we said that A flat diminished goes with G7, because remember, this G7, this G can move up a half step to make A flat diminished, you know, or the A flat diminished can move down a half step, that A flat to get G7. So we looked at playing this diminished on the top, but what happens if I take this A flat diminished and lower any other note? Let's say I lower the D. I get D flat 7, okay? There's the 1, 3, 5, 7. Now you can play those two chords together. So you take the G7 shell here, 1 and 7, the A flat diminished on the top, and just lower any of the other notes, because let's hear the sound. Get a really nice sound by doing that, okay? Or I could have lowered the F a half step, like that. Now I totally realise that many of you will have been taught that that first one is G7, flat 5, flat 9. Then you would have been taught the second one is G13, flat 9. But if you just know the diminished, you can start moving stuff around. It's really cool. And also, you can join them up. So let's say I start with that A flat diminished, lower the top note. I get G7 with E7 now, because the right hand's E7. let's say that I put it back but lower the D. Now I've got G7 with D flat 7. So these two dominants are both brothers of G7. So you could play them together. Yeah, that kind of thing. I know Barry says that's the beginning of my romance. And that's why there's nothing wrong with those long chord names, but really in that much time, let's say I'm playing a 1-6-2-5, and I play that move. So I've got E7 over the top, D flat 7 over the top, G6 over C over the top. In that much time, I don't want to be starting to say, okay, that's a G13 with a flat 9, that's a G7 flat 5, flat 9, that's a C major 9. I'd rather know about the diminished. Okay, so that's just a quick little taster of what comes after that. Okay, so a lot of fast talk towards the end to fit it in. Haven't seen any other questions pop up. I hope there's nothing wrong with the Q&A app because it's normally really busy by this time. If you do have questions, drop me an email, sean@jazzpianolessons.co.uk, Sean, S-H-A-N. And if you're not a member or a student and you're interested in the stuff we do, you can catch me for a Skype lesson or a lesson in central London. Or what's really cool is join the Jazz Skills website where we've got really affordable subscriptions, and we've got around 200 short videos. I keep them short on purpose because I like them bite-sized, you know, sort of 5 to 7 minutes and even less sometimes. Just so that you can digest them, watch them over and over again as many times as you want. They're structured into modules courses. We have members-only webinars like this every month, and I just really love doing it and really love meeting the students that are partaking and improving their playing. Simon Neal says, so pretty, love these. Yeah, me too, Simon. Thanks for partaking. Thank you all very much for coming. I hope you got something out of it, and plenty of tips to improve your jazz chords. See you on the next one. I'll do another public one at some point soon. The next members only one will be in 2 weeks from this one, guys. Thank you, Ben. Okay, thanks, guys. Good night from London. See you again soon. Bye for now.